Welcome to The Explainer. So, have you ever actually stopped to think about how the most romantic, sweeping moments of your entire life, falling in love, getting married, building a new family, are ultimately governed by some of the driest, most rigid government paperwork on Earth? Well, today we are taking a fascinating journey into exactly that. We're going to look at how the government takes the pure romance of life's major milestones and literally turns it into highly specific, heavily regulated administrative processes. It's the bureaucratic maze of romance on identity, and honestly, it's a wildly interesting ride. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our roadmap for today follows the actual timeline of this major life event. First, the rules of engagement. Then, waiting for the license. Third, making it official. Fourth, changing your legal identity. And finally, fixing clerical errors.
All right, Section 1, the rules of engagement, the state's prerequisites. Picture this. You found the one, you've popped the question, and you are so ready to tie the knot. But before any of that romance can legally begin, you gotta look at how the state actually views this union in its statutory text. Under Iowa Code 595.2, the state lays out its fundamental framework. It explicitly states that a marriage is valid only if each party is 18 years of age or older. Now, there is a provision for 16 or 17-year-olds, but they have to get both written parental consent and judicial approval. The statute also historically and currently defines a valid marriage in the state as being between a male and a female. So this is the exact, unbending legal language that sets the boundaries before you've even filled out a single form.
Now, true love might be completely priceless to you, but the government's recognition of it? Yeah, that definitely is not. To submit your marriage application in places like Marion County, Iowa, you're going to need exactly $35. And they are very specific about this, payable only by cash or check. It's a playful, kind of absurd contrast when you think about it, right? The grand, immeasurable value of a lifelong commitment is just boiled down by the county recorder to a $35 processing fee.
Moving on to Section 2, waiting for the license, the mandatory pause. Because, once you hand over that $35, you don't get to just walk down the aisle immediately. Nope. Getting married in Iowa is a very strict 4-step process. Step 1 is the application, which actually requires 3 different people to sign it in front of a notary. Step 2 is collecting your marriage packet. Step 3 is the ceremony itself, and Step 4 is receiving that all-important certified copy. So this is your clear roadmap. You absolutely cannot skip a step, and you definitely cannot rush them. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how rigid that administrative pause really is. This is Marion County's mandatory 5-day waiting period matrix. When the county computes your valid date, the day you actually applied is completely thrown out. It's excluded. So if you apply on a Monday, your license isn't legally valid until Friday. Apply on a Thursday, and you are waiting all the way until Monday. The government essentially mandates a cooling-off period to ensure you are entirely 100% certain before you take the plunge.
Which brings us to Section 3, making it official, validating the union.
Okay, so your waiting period has finally passed and the wedding day is here. But let's shift our focus for a second from the happy couple to the person standing opposite them. So who can actually marry a couple in the state of Iowa? Like, who does the government actually trust to finalize all this paperwork?
Well, the requirements are surprisingly broad in some ways, but incredibly strict in others. You can be married by an ordained minister, basically any faith leader the couple recognizes, or an Iowa judge or magistrate. But here is the absolute non-negotiable catch. All participants, that means the couple, the 2 witnesses, and the officiant, must be physically present at the exact same time within the geographic boundaries of Iowa. There are absolutely no proxy, telephone, or electronic ceremonies allowed. So no, you definitely cannot get legally married over a FaceTime call.
Now, once the vows are exchanged, an incredible legal responsibility shifts entirely onto the officiant. They have exactly 15 days to return that completed marriage certificate to the county registrar. If they miss this deadline, the whole bureaucratic machinery just comes to a grinding halt, and your legal union is left hanging in administrative limbo.
Just listen to the incredibly clinical language from Iowa Code 595.13. It says, after the marriage has been solemnized, the officiating minister or magistrate shall attest to the marriage on the blank provided and return the certificate within 15 days. Talk about a mood killer. You transition instantly from the emotional high of a beautiful wedding straight into the cold, hard deadline of returning a piece of government paper.
Next up, Section 4, changing your legal identity. The legal cascade.
So, the ceremony is over, the cake is eaten, but legally, a massive cascade of identity changes is really just beginning. Under Iowa Code 595.5, you have to indicate your new legal name on the marriage application before you even get married. And here's the real kicker with this. Once that original certificate is filed, it absolutely cannot be modified later to reflect a court-ordered legal change of name. You literally have to decide your future legal identity up front. If you change your mind later on, you can't just cross it out with a pen. You are facing an entirely different, complex legal battle.
Now, what's really interesting about this is seeing exactly what that legal battle looks like. This is the abstract required by the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services to change a registrant's legal name on a birth certificate. It grounds this super abstract concept of an identity change into a dense, rigid government form that essentially strips away your personal narrative and just replaces it with checkboxes, official seals, and court case numbers.
Redefining yourself legally is methodical, it's slow, and it's heavily fee-driven. To process this birth certificate name change, you're looking at a $15 administrative processing fee plus $20 for every certified copy you need. It takes 4 to 6 weeks of processing time, and it absolutely requires a certified copy of a court decree. Your legal identity is fundamentally tied up in these state-mandated fees and strict timelines.
Finally, Section 5, Fixing Clerical Errors, Bureaucratic Mistakes.
But what happens when the government, or even you, makes a simple, honest mistake? Imagine someone misspells your last name by one single letter on your marriage license or your birth certificate. You can't just scratch it out. You need an affidavit of correction. This is a highly formal, sworn, notarized statement used specifically to fix minor clerical errors like a misspelled name or a transposed date on an official legal document, all without replacing the original record itself.
But we really have to clarify the strict boundaries of this tool. An affidavit of correction is strictly for minor typos and spelling errors. Think of it as a clerical band-aid. You absolutely cannot use it for major legal surgeries. If you need to make major substantive changes to ownership rights or declare general sworn facts, you would need an entirely different, much heavier document, like an affidavit of truth or a correction deed.
So the crucial point here is the immense legal gravity attached to fixing a simple typo. As the guidance from 360 Legal Forms highlights, this document is signed under penalty of perjury. Just think about that for a second. The state demands that you swear a legal oath in front of a notary public just to prove that an A was supposed to be an E. Knowingly lying on this form isn't just frowned upon. It is a serious, punishable crime.
And of course, the waiting doesn't stop there. Walk through this timeline with me for a standard self-name correction process. It takes 7 to 14 days just for document submission and verification. Then 15 to 30 days for a Gazette notification if it requires formal publication. Add another 15 to 30 days just for application processing, and finally 7 to 10 days for the final update. You could literally be waiting months to fix a single bureaucratic mistake that took 1 second to make.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today, and leaves us with this pretty provocative question. If a single typo on a piece of paper requires sworn affidavits, notary seals, processing fees, and months of waiting to fix, is your legal identity truly your own? Or is it just a temporary lease, strictly granted and heavily regulated by state paperwork? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I highly encourage you to go check out the source materials, and I bet you'll be looking at your own documents a little bit differently from now on. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.